Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
GAO says the agency responsible for overseeing classified work at defense contractors is falling short of its mission, with gaps in inspections, staffing, and risk prioritization. Joe Kirschbaum of the Government Accountability Office explains how those weaknesses affect security and what changes matter most now. Mr. Kirschbaum, thank you for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
This is an important topic, industrial security concerns. With combat operations, we're hearing about challenges protecting classified information in the industrial base. As you began this report, this assessment, what were the critical issues that GAO wanted to look at?
The issue of protecting classified information has indeed been around a long time, even before there were computers and automated information systems. But obviously the advent of those systems in the information age has made it much more complex. So we look at the way the U.S. government protects classified information across the board, both within executive branch agencies and, in this case, outside the government, contractors, businesses who, through government contracts and other arrangements, have to have access to classified information and protect that information. So we're interested in seeing how they do that and how the government ensures that security standards are met.
Before we get into the gaps that you found, walk us through how the industrial security system is supposed to function. What is DCSA responsible for? How is risk management supposed to protect classified information across the contractor base?
The way the government protects classified information is based in sets of standards that are established through NIST standards, and through organizations like Committee on National Security Systems, which is headed by DoD, but also with representation from all the relevant government agencies you can think of. They're the ones who set the standards, and then those standards are executed by the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, DCSA, their industrial security function. What they do is they help clear contractor facilities for processing, handling, storing classified information, both in terms of physical storage and handling, and in terms of the people handling it, and also the information systems. And the way they do this is through, first of all, kind of certification for clearing those facilities in the first place to operate a government contract with those facilities. And then, probably more importantly, routine assessments of those companies and contractors and facilities to ensure that they're continuing to meet those standards, determine where they are not meeting standards, and ensure that any gaps are closed. That's the way that's supposed to work. It's generally the risk management approach, and it is all about risk management approach. It's about determining how well these facilities are meeting standards, determining when they are not and how to address them as rapidly as possible, and also determining what the weight of those facilities are, because they're not all the same. So where should the weight of effort be? The way the industrial security program works is they have about 329 field or regional operators in 2025 that oversee and do security assessments at about 12,500 cleared facilities and upwards of 5,500 classified IT systems. They do routine investigations and assessments of those facilities.
As you looked at those routine inspections, you noted that DCSA is completing less than half of its required inspections, about 4,600 in FY 2025, and still documenting hundreds of violations and vulnerabilities. So when you look at that, both the limited number, I guess, of inspections and the huge number of findings, what does that tell you about how well risk is actually being identified and managed?
So those are exactly the concerns that we have when you look at the information. Yes, they're unable with their current resources, the numbers of field operators and regional operators, to cover the number and frequency of the security assessments that they are required to do. And it's roughly on a 12 to 18 month cycle. The standard is for there to be routine assessments. The way the guidance sets it out. It's placed between 12 and 18 months, and they're not able to do assessments of all of those facilities in that time. So yes, they're behind. And when you look at what they find, the numbers of security violations, how they're categorized, it matches kind of what we've seen in other areas in terms of cybersecurity. And I mean, by and large, 60% of all the violations are data spills, unintentional data spills. Those are the kind of things you find in most cases in the cyber realm. Upwards of sometimes 80% of anything you hear as a cyber incident is, some cases, a dumb mistake or somebody not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's the realm of what they're finding in most of the security violations. What we do see from the data also is when they do find those security violations, you look at kind of how they break out, and most of them have been on the books for under 30 days. There's about an average of about 67 days for them to identify them, develop a plan with the companies, and resolve those security vulnerabilities. That's pretty good. They're doing a pretty good job of actually managing the vulnerabilities they find. The concern, of course, is by not being able to do the number and frequency of security assessments over time. What they find is, for each delay that they have to do for a facility, there's a more upwards of 1.5 to 2%, or excuse me, 2 times the number of potential violations. They tend to stack up, which is what happens. It's exactly what you'd expect. You don't do assessments over time, you get more of these kind of hygiene vulnerabilities. And the concern is that those will allow much more to slip through the cracks and increase the overall risk.
I'm speaking with Joe Kirschbaum. He's a director of defense capabilities and management issues at GAO. Joe, the report points to several capability and capacity shortfalls at DCSA, limited analytical tools, workforce shortages, challenges at the regional level. As the cyber threats to private sector companies increase, especially in the defense industrial base, which of these capacity challenges poses the biggest risk to DCSA, and how can they be addressed?
The overall risk is kind of a combination of things, and it is to the adequacy of their risk management system. The industrial security program's ability to assess where the risk is and how best and most effectively to address it. So, for example, on the numbers of staff, the numbers of staff has been insufficient for them to do the numbers and types of security assessments that they want to do. One of the things that we have recommended is that they do an assessment of just what they would need to address those resource gaps. And among those things is taking advantage of the risk management framework to determine what facilities need more attention than others. So, for example, there's a large number of facilities that are called access elsewhere facilities. They don't actually store classified information on those facilities. So, for example, those may not need the number, frequency, and type of security assessment as others do. They can put those resources elsewhere. That's one of the things that DCSA is looking at. That's one of the things we recommend that they do that would help some of the resource issues. Others are like some of the tools that they have to do those assessments and manage that information. They're outdated. They're like the next best thing to just a spreadsheet that's passed around back and forth. They don't have the kind of tools for facilitators and people in the industry to query, to find trends in the violations, to share information back and forth. And then also improvements in their overall information systems, which they are doing, but gathering information from the users of that system that will make it much more effective and efficient to operate.
Part of your process in doing this report was focus groups. What did you hear in the course of those focus groups, especially from industry and their frustration with this process?
So the focus groups we did about 12 focus groups, and they were mostly that were the members of all the DCSA security facilitators in the field and in the regions. And a lot of their frustrations mirrored kind of what we've been talking about, frustration with some of the inadequacy of the information systems, the inability to do the kind of queries of systems that would allow them to identify trends, to share information more effectively, concern about the results or the impacts of not being able to do the number and frequency of assessments and what that might mean over time. And then also some concerns about the way the DCSA is potentially rolling out the new system to information system, the IT system that they have to kind of improve the system overall. They're concerned that they weren't being consulted about just what they would need. And as it turns out, what DCSA has been doing, they've been using and the Agile framework to help develop this system. And I think there's a little bit of a mismatch between what the expectation is among their ultimate users about when they would be consulted versus where the DCSA is in rolling out the system. They do intend to get much more of that input from users, which is we found have been really critical to help them all get to the information system they need over time.
So as we think forward, is this really just a funding problem? Does DCSA just need more money to put more people and better IT on the job? Or do we need to go back and look at the requirements for these inspections and maybe bring them into the 21st century?
I think it's best to categorize as a little bit of everything. It is not just a resource problem. I mean, there are resource issues, obviously, but it is all about that risk management framework. And it's not just risk management within the National Industrial Security Program. So one of the things we've been talking about is, better assessments of what types of facilities you have, where resources can be better put and applied. For example, some of the things that DoD said they were going to do in response to our recommendations is potentially shifting more of the responsibility for doing some of the assessments onto the military services, which obviously would require more training and more assessments. But that's one way to help with the resource issues. The other is for the DCSA writ large to consider where this program fits in. The National Industrial Security Program, as we've talked about in the report, is roughly $160 million annually for that program. But DCSA also oversees the personnel vetting program for the Department of Defense and others. That's the security clearances. That one's upwards of $1.3 billion per year. So it dwarfs the National Industrial Security Program, and but it's an overall responsibility. So figuring out where NISP fits into the overall DCA responsibilities is one of the things that they can do to help with their overall resource issues as well.
I've been speaking with Joe Kirschbaum. He's a Director of Defense Capabilities and Management Issues at GAO. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
We'll publish this interview and a link to the report at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.